What's up guys, it's your boy LC here and happy Valentine's Day to all that are checking out this video. The topic I want to discuss today is one of gaming's, and actually I would go so far as to say one of pop culture's greatest love triangles of all time. That being Cloud, Aerith, and Tifa of Final Fantasy VII. Today we'll be breaking down what makes this one of the most definitive love triangles in all of gaming, and why after 25 years after the game's release, fans are still eagerly shipping, wait, how do you pronounce this? Clarith and Clouty, respectively? I'm not sure if I said that right. And I genuinely hope that's the last time in this life I ever have to utter those two words. We'll be tackling the age-old question of who should Cloud pick, Tifa or Aerith, and the potential outcomes within the future of the Final Fantasy VII Remake series, as it seems that they are tweaking the formula just well enough that any possibility now seems on the table. With that being said, as a reminder, we are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so make sure you subscribe for future RPG and Final Fantasy content, and let me know down in the comments who you think Cloud should have ended up with, and what stood out to you regarding Final Fantasy VII's infamous love triangle. Okay, it's finally time. Let's talk about who's the best girl. Love triangles aren't necessarily anything new to media and storytelling formats. They've long been used as a storytelling vehicle to provide emotional investment and keep audiences engaged in multi-act structures such as an episodic weekly television series or grand-scale novel or film trilogies. But when it comes to gaming, there has always been one that has edged out all others quite effortlessly, and is certainly one of the elements that allow Final Fantasy VII to be as widely accepted and loved as a groundbreaking title at the time of its release. This was one of the first times that Square dealt quite as deeply in the romance aspect of its main characters in a Final Fantasy series, and in comparison makes their previous outing of Final Fantasy IV's love triangle of Cecil, Kain, and Rosa feel absolutely elementary in hindsight. So why do fans absolutely love this triangle? Well, we'll dive into how this narrative does an exceptional job at building the romantic tension between all three party members and keeping the audience waiting with bated breath and the ever-looming question of will they, won't they? It also does a great job at playing to the audience's want to live vicariously through Cloud and pick who we deem to be the better of the two. You could open a conversation with most Final Fantasy fans by saying the following: are you a Tifa or an Aerith kind of guy? And they would literally know all of the underlying questions you are implying with your query. What other game has that? So let's start this tale off like any other great story, at the beginning. For some historical context regarding our three heroes in this love triangle, Cloud and Tifa were both raised in Nibelheim Village and had somewhat of a slow burn from a childhood friendship into their teenage years where Cloud departs to join the soldier program in an effort to impress Tifa. Fast forward a few years to the Nibelheim incident, which causes Tifa to grow a great hatred for Shinra due to Sephiroth's destruction of the town and the slaying of her father. This is an abridged version of the events for the sake of time, as combing through every little detail would make this video quite insanely long. Now when Tifa meets Cloud again working as a mercenary, she immediately realizes that there is something amiss regarding her old friend and tags along to see if she can uncover why Cloud's memories seem to be wildly inconsistent and why he seems to have changed starkly as a person. So in a way, Tifa's initial role in this story is akin to a bit of a childhood friend, high school sweetheart role, a character who our hero would generally hold some type of residual feelings or love for, but in most narratives, this is replaced by a newer love interest that often represents a distinct dichotomy between both characters. Enter the Flower Girl, or Aerith or Ares if you played the OG PS1 version back in the day. Her introduction to Cloud is simultaneously one of the most rudimentary in the game and easily one of the most memorable, the cute flower girl in the street. While this choice ends up being relatively inconsequential throughout the entire scheme of the game, their introduction as Cloud crashes through the roof of her church in Sector 5 and is solicited to be her bodyguard, we can see the immediate difference between Cloud's dynamic with both of these ladies. Speaking of, let's do a bit of a character analysis for both Tifa and Aerith. Let's start with Tifa, your childhood sweetheart turned eco-terrorist with a heart of gold. Yeah, that's what we'll call it, heart. Certainly a bit more liberal in her overall attire than the rest of the cast, her demeanor is one built around compassion and empathy, and a bit of a monthly figure to the orphans of Sector 7, and is an emotional rock for the Avalanche crew overall. Underneath this surface layer presents a slightly more conflicted persona that is marred by what she perceives to be past failures in her life, and it can be said that she's certainly overly critical of herself to a fault. Transpose this with Aerith, who has a seemingly endless upbeat and joyful demeanor that seems to light up every room and scenario she's in. Not that Tifa is a bit of an emo kid, it just seems that Aerith is a bit easier to come by at a smile at times. I think one of her core attributes is her steadfast determination and following what she truly believes to be right to be one of her most endearing qualities. On the other hand, Tifa seems to be a bit more grounded and bogged down with the realities of the world, while Aerith seems to keep an almost effervescent outlook on the world and its state throughout the majority of the playthrough. Now, outside of physical traits and personality, the way the narrative in Final Fantasy VII unfolds seems to directly set these two up to be a perfect foil for each other. The build-up in romantic tension is illustrated even further in segments like the infamous Golden Saucer date night. Even to a casual observer, you can see how their manner of dress is dictated to show their differences, with Aerith tending to dress a bit more conservatively, to Tifa's attire, which could be described as something akin to something you might see at your local Hooters. The differences between these two is emphasized repeatedly throughout the story, and does a superb job at seemingly giving the player the option to pick between these two wildly opposite spectrums. So who should Cloud pick? You see, from my POV, between Tifa and Aerith, there really isn't a wrong answer here from a purely subjective point of view. Both are extremely attractive individuals, each hosting their own set of unique personality traits that set them apart from almost every other female character in the game. When you get to its core, fundamentally Tifa represents the familiar, something known, the everyday so to speak. For example, for any of us here that would have imagined marrying our first love or childhood romance, to a certain degree we could have predicted how that would have went. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the ordinary if you genuinely love the other person. Funny enough, Cloud's entire quest and foray into the soldier program is predicated based off his feelings towards her and his misguided thinking that he had to do something grandiose to win over someone who was already clearly in love with him. And then we have Aerith, who represents the new, the unknown, and endless possibility. Cloud's chance meeting with Aerith permanently changes the course of his life during the events of Final Fantasy VII, and his subsequent aftermath illustrated in Advent Children. It could be argued that the two share a very unique emotional connection due to both having been experimented by Shinra and Hojo respectively, and they are both somewhat alone in their unique understanding of the grave threat that Sephiroth poses throughout the majority of Final Fantasy VII. So Cloud and Aerith, I would see these two together, but fundamentally it seems a bit like a pipe dream, because Aerith, throughout the duration of their relationship, doesn't actually even know who he is at his core. And funny enough, this is something that Tifa is actually the one that helps him reconcile. So in the end, there really isn't a choice, it all is just a bit of a fallacy. Growing up, I remember reading so many online threads that there was a way you could save Aerith from dying and possibly replace her with Tifa. People seemingly wanted her to avoid her fate and for those two to somehow defy the odds and end up together. However, Aerith's destiny is and always has been set in stone. Well, for the original title anyway. I think while there are some romantic underpinnings throughout, that it's possible that a significant portion of Cloud and Aerith's chemistry had to do with Cloud's altered memories as a result of the Hojo experimentation. And at last, we arrive at Zack Fair. This is Aerith's original first love as depicted in Crisis Core, and it's clear to see that Cloud hits a lot of the same notes as Zack did. Let's compare. A young soldier, giant sword, spiky hair, the holy trifecta. While Cloud's personality is certainly his own, it's clear to see that some of these same beats could have easily turned Aerith's lingering feelings of loss regarding Zack to be slowly translated into a budding love affair with Cloud. But in the end, I think that the entire love triangle is nothing more than a ruse, an entertaining one, but a ruse nonetheless. Aerith's true role in Cloud's character arc is one of loss, hope, and redemption, not a raw, passionate love affair. As seen in the events of Advent Children, Cloud has allowed the memories of his failure to save Aerith to slowly ebb into every facet of his life and slowly capsize all of his previous friendships he established within the original run of Final Fantasy VII. Her interactions with him throughout the film revolve around him finding a way to forgive himself for not being able to save her from her untimely demise, and to not throw away his future lamenting the past. And you know what? I think that arc from beginning to end is much more satisfying than a potentially continued forced love triangle throughout the entirety of the game. Now, freeze frame. Everything I just went over and reviewed kinda goes out the window when looking at the Nomura funhouse of Final Fantasy VII Remake's story. I think that between the seemingly parallel dimensions being presented to us, that there likely is going to be a way to save both Zack and Aerith and to have them be together in a bit of a best ending kind of situation. From a purely pragmatic viewpoint, it makes sense that Cloud should always end up with Tifa as Aerith is no longer an option. And to be honest, the emotional resonance that Cloud and Tifa build throughout the course of Final Fantasy VII and all of its properties clearly demonstrate that this is to be, air quotes, the true option. I mean bro, she literally put your mind back together from scratch. How many chicks out there can you see doing that? And with that, we're going to cap off. As always, guys, I appreciate you guys checking out this video. Let me know down in the comments, who do you think Cloud should pick, Tifa or Aerith? You know, personally, my pick going to be for Jessie, because Jessie, she look kind of good in that remake. But let me know. And if you like the content, make sure you like, comment, subscribe for weekly JRPG and Final Fantasy content. LC signing out. Peace.